Well, guys, we're in the final part of the Norman Kingdom in Italy by Kings and Generals. This has been quite the interesting series, but now we're gonna wrap it up. So, the link to his video is down in the description down below. And if you enjoy my content or my commentary and want to help support me, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I would appreciate it very much. It would really help out my small but humble channel. And, yeah, I don't really have much else to say other than we should probably get to it, eh? Without any further ado, let's look at the Norman Kingdom in Italy, the thrilling conclusion.
As much as cosmopolitan commerce was working for him, King Roger never gave up his warrior roots. After the conquest of Sicily by his forebears, the coast of North Africa was the natural next stepping stone in the House of Hauteville's intergenerational quest to achieve total domination over the Mediterranean Sea. Much like Sicily, the ancient homeland of Hannibal Barca had once been a Christian province of the Roman Empire, which had been incorporated into the Ummah after the Muslim faith's explosive expansion out of Arabia. From its fertile orange groves to its bustling urban entrepôts, Ifriqiya was a land replete with natural resources and commercial potential. During its heyday in the 11th century, the ethnic Berber Zirid dynasty had been arguably the most powerful state in the Western Mediterranean, but a disastrous war against their Fatimid overlords had seen their effective territory reduced to a coastal littoral centered around the city of Mahdia. Despite these setbacks, the Zirids had made the best of what they had left, establishing themselves as a regional powerhouse of maritime commerce, much like ancient Carthage had done in the same region a millennium prior. By the time Roger II rose to power, regular economic ties had been established between the Zirids and Norman Sicily. The two regions were natural trading partners. Sicily, having until recently been under Islamic rule as a Zirid protectorate, had closer cultural ties to the Arabs and Berbers of the Maghreb than it did to the Latins of Peninsular Italy. Of course, a cultural affinity between two regions does not necessitate a harmonious relationship between their respective governments. Indeed, early in Roger II's reign, the economic partnership between the House of Hauteville and the Sanhaja Berbers of the Banu Ziri began rapidly deteriorating. In 1118, the Zirid emir, Ali ibn Yahya, faced insurrection when his ostensible vassal, Rafi, the governor of Gabis, broke ties with his overlord to protest against the trade monopoly that Ibn Yahya had imposed on Rafi's city. Roger II, still only a duke at this point, chose to intercede on the side of Gabis against Mahdia, deploying the Sicilian navy to help the former to assert its right to trade independently from the latter. Naturally, the emir, Ibn Yahya, did not take this lying down, and in retaliation, formed a shrewd alliance with the neighbouring Almoravid dynasty with the goal of launching a Muslim reconquista of the Isle of Sicily. What followed was essentially a high-stakes naval slap fight. In 1122, an Almoravid squadron attacked the Calabrian town of Nicotera and sailed away with its women and children. Roger's retribution came a year later, when he deployed a fleet of 300 ships to capture Mahdia. An Islamic Defense Corps repulsed this invasion attempt at the fortress of Al-Dimas. Still, the Norman Duke could content himself with a consolation prize, the Isle of Pantelleria, which his forces had seized en route. 4 years later, the warriors of the Maghreb struck back when an Almoravid navy made landfall in western Sicily and sacked the city of Syracuse. In the following years, the balance of power shifted dramatically in the de Hauteville's favour. Throughout the 1130s, Roger II, now a king, effectively neutralized all his enemies in Europe, crushing his rebellious vassals in Apulia and outwitting the attempts made by the Byzantine Empire, German Empire, and the papacy to dethrone him. His power base now secure, the Norman king could now devote far more time and resources to his ongoing Africa problem. On the flip side, Roger's Zirid rivals were in an increasingly precarious situation. Their alliance with the Almoravids had broken down, exposing them politically to regional rivals like the Hammadids. In fact, in a rather cruel twist of fate, In 1135, Al-Hasan ibn Ali, the same Zirid prince who had fended off the Norman invasion force in 1123, was left with no other options but to invoke Roger's protection to ward off a Hammadid invasion. In return for his...
The way fortune has favored Roger, man. And again, like, anytime you invite the Normans or anyone else and you have to rely on them to get by, usually that's kind of a good pretext of ending up under someone's thumb, or if not, straight up absorbed by them. So this is probably already the beginning of the end for them, I would imagine, right? At least now that they have to rely on Roger, who's no doubt gonna take great advantage of this now.
military intervention, the de Hauteville monarch secured extensive economic privileges in Ifriqiya, effectively turning Zirid Madia into a tribute-paying vassal state of the Norman domain. 1135 was also the year in which the Normans conquered their first foothold in Africa, the Isle of Djerba. This island was a haven of lawless Berber pirates who acknowledged no sultan, and its freebooter crews had long been a plague upon Sicilian sea lanes. King Roger deployed his Emir of Emirs, George of Antioch, to capture this nest of buccaneers. The Greco-Armenian statesman accomplished this task swiftly and thoroughly. Interestingly enough, the Christian conquest of Djerba did not raise alarm bells in the Muslim world. The ungovernable pirates had been considered loathsome to the Islamic princes of the Maghreb, who, if anything, were happy to see the Normans wipe them out. Of course, their tune would soon change.
Yeah, again, the Normans kind of did this in the beginning. They were invited to, you know, they started off as mercenaries in Europe, right? And the thing about the Normans is that, as a group, they had ambition for more. You know, that's kind of like a key trait among this group of people. And they ended up just basically taking southern Italy for themselves and Sicily. And you see it kind of, history kind of repeats in a funny way here. It's like, oh, we're inviting you here, you know, at least here to help us, you know? And now there's like, well, let me start encroaching more, because, again, they're not satisfied with just, you know, just that. They want more, and they're already going southward, as you can see. They've dominated the north, they've dominated Europe, and now where else to go but south and just take more, you know?
When it became evident that King Roger's imperialistic ambitions in the Maghreb did not end at Djerba, the next stage of the Norman conquest of Ifriqiya was precipitated by environmental calamity. In the early 1140s, a virulent famine afflicted the northern African coastline, causing massive, widespread starvation. In this caustic cocktail of socio-economic instability, dozens of Ifriqiyan cities and towns entered into open rebellion against their Zirid overlords. Not only were the Zirid emirs in Madia essentially powerless to stamp out these revolts, but they had also become completely economically dependent upon Sicilian grain shipments and politically beholden to the will of the Sicilian king. Divine Providence.
He's basically conquered them, like you mentioned. They're basically vassals, but he already has them under you know, his thumb, which is kind of amazing already, without having to do a major battle.
Had provided King Roger with a golden opportunity for land expansion. His longtime Zirid rivals had become the sick man of the Mediterranean, belly up and effectively helpless. There would never be a better time to strike. From 1142 onwards, Sicilian fleets began launching regular amphibious invasions of various Ifriqiyan cities. In 1144, the port of Brest was captured. In 1146, Tripoli of the West followed. And in 1148, Gabes, Sfax and Sousse had all been seized by a Norman force led by George of Antioch.
Again, opportunistic. Again, I have to say, fortune has favored Roger. Like, he's a genius in all aspects. He can be a warrior, he can be a statesman, an administrator. Like, this man is amazing. And I really have come to... He's so far my favorite Norman king that we've covered, you know? And, like, opportunistic. Like, this golden opportunity just presented itself, and he takes complete advantage of it. Wow.
When an alarmed Zirid Emir al-Hassan wrote to King Roger, reminding him that their two nations were supposed to be allies, Roger pithily replied that it was because he was the good Emir's ally that he was conquering these towns, all of whom had been rebelling against Zirid rule. This facade of a casus belli was promptly dropped a year later, when the Amiratus Amiratorum's forces laid siege to the Zirid capital itself. Mahdia fell on the 22nd of June, and for 2 hours the Norman army pillaged the city, while its Muslim population took refuge among the homes and churches of the town's native Christian community. By the end of this campaign, the Zirid dynasty, which had endured for over 200 years, was no more, and Roger II had annexed a chunk of African territory which extended from Tripoli to the borders of Tunis and from the western Maghreb to Kairouan.
Wow.
The conquest of Africa was a great boon for the Normans. The economic connections between Sicily and Africa, which were strong before the conquest, were now strengthened, with the major trading cities on both sides of the central Mediterranean now part of the same kingdom.
It's amazing. I was at least aware of the Normans' presence in Europe and Italy, but I never knew they got this far into Africa itself. Like, this is all very much new to me. Again, Roger, bro. He's a beast.
Ultimately, the Normans' rule did little to change the political and cultural landscape of the Maghreb. Rather than rule directly, King Roger used Arab and Berber intermediaries to manage his African domains on his behalf. The local African aristocracy was largely left in place, and Muslim princes controlled the civil government under Sicilian oversight. However, one group which saw their fortunes change for the better was the indigenous African Christians. Indeed, even in the High Middle Ages, a community of Christians on the Maghreb coast still predated the Islamic expansion into the region and still spoke a Latin vernacular language some 500 years after the Arabs had initially conquered the region from the Roman Empire. Needless to say, they were eager to accept the protection of their new Norman Christian overlord. As we've seen many times throughout history,
Imagine being
a kingdom's golden age often lasts only as long as the reign of its strongest king. Unfortunately for Norman Sicily, this was a rule that would apply to them too. On the 26th of February 1154, King Roger II passed away at the age of 58, succeeded by his son, King William I, known to his critics as William the Bad.
Oh.
While this epithet was probably the result of some contemporary propaganda, William was clearly not the shrewd administrator his father had been, neglecting his duties as king while allowing his officials to do all the work for him. Smelling weakness, the traditional enemies of the Normans leapt into action. The papacy and the emperors of the Germans and the Greeks all did their part to inspire the Norman barons of Apulia and Calabria.
Yeah, we've seen this trend many times. You know, you can be a great emperor or king or statesman or whatever in your own time, but the thing is that no matter what, you're still immortal, and you know, eventually you're gonna go. Like, eventually your kingdom is gonna go on, hopefully after you, and you would want it to. And then that's why there's an importance in training up the next generation, because you're not gonna be young forever. You're not gonna be at the peak of your game forever. And, you know, eventually if you go, we've seen great emperors die only to be met with weak follow-ups. I mean, like the Romans, for example, the Byzantines, you know, had great emperors, but then followed up by bad ones or mediocre ones. And Roger's life was apparently linked to the Norman Golden Age. Again, I don't know how much longer the Norman Kingdom lasts. I said that I think Roger's the best, but I said that without even knowing any more follow-up Norman kings. But already, like, William kind of shows a lack of diligence in his work as a king compared to his dad, who was all over the place and very, you know, in the weeds, as it were. Very hands-on. And so again, like, when you have you need like great follow-ups in order to solidify a great kingdom. And it seems like Roger didn't get that. So yeah.
To once more rebel. The Byzantines even launched a direct invasion of the Apulian coast, aiming to retake the land that had been theirs a century earlier. To everyone's surprise, King William was actually able to put down the rebellions and fend off the invading Greeks, but in the process, he lost his African realms to the Almohad Caliphate. Nevertheless, there were other social problems plaguing William's reign. In the latter half of the 12th century, migration from Western Europe tilted the demographics of Sicily in favor of the Western Catholic population. As a result, the multicultural tolerance shown towards the island's non-Catholic faiths began to erode away. By the 1160s, organized violence against Sicily's Muslim population became more common. Over the following decades, an unofficial religious frontier was formed, with Christians dominating the northeast and Muslims increasingly migrating away to the southwest. William I died in 1166, succeeded by his son, William II. By all accounts, William II was a decent ruler. He mostly kept the peace in his realm, and tried to revive the conquering glory of his ancestors, dabbling in the Third Crusade against the iconic Saladin, and even attempting to conquer Byzantine Greece. However, neither venture was particularly successful. Unfortunately for William II, his entire reign would come to be defined by a single fatal mistake. During the first half of his reign, he had decreed that in the event that he should die without siring a son, his aunt Constance would be the sole heir to the Kingdom of Sicily. This was an issue because Constance was betrothed to Henry VI of the House of Hohenstaufen, son of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick. Long had the emperors of the Germans sought to drive the Normans out of southern Italy. Now, through a cunningly crafted marriage to a Norman princess, they had the legal means to seize the Sicilian throne and end Norman rule in the region.
Wow. That's insane. Holy crap, that's how it ends? They got outplayed, essentially. Dang, dude. Yeah, he put the end... I guess that's how it ends. Like, the Norman kingdom ends not with a bang, but with a whimper, essentially. They just dissolve because William made his wife into, yeah, his heir, essentially, right? If anything should happen to him, and then all that needs to happen is for him to go, and now... Wow. That sucks. Considering he wasn't, like, an evil or I mean, I don't know about all his policies or anything, but again, I trust kings and generals were that he was a pretty decent king, at least, you know, in keeping the peace and just kind of trying to rule his area. But dang, that mistake is a pretty big one. He kind of ends the kingdom with that. Wow, the Norman kingdom wasn't that long-lived, eh?
For good. Sure enough, William II died with no son in 1189, plunging southern Italy into a civil war. Having no desire to be ruled by a German, the Norman aristocracy elected one Tancred de Hauteville to be their king, but Constance and Henry pressed their claim and had prevailed by 1194. Thus the royal blood of the Norman House of Hauteville was subsumed into the Hohenstaufens, and Norman rule over Italy was formally ended. The ascension of a German dynasty ushered in a new era for Sicily and southern Italy, and an aggressive policy of Latinization. By 1282, the Muslims had all been deported.
So that's how the House of the Norman royal line ends, huh? again, like that was a huge mistake on William's part, and not having a kid, another big one. I'm not sure if his wife was barren or not. I know that there were complications and stuff, but still, that's not. It's never good to leave your realm without an heir or a successor, and that's what happened. And again, you have to give it to these Normans under Roger and stuff. They were really tolerant. In fact, they kind of welcomed all of these different groups, their ideas, their scholars to create this culturally diverse and rich area. But again, the medieval era, the politics of Europe now seeped in, unfortunately, and just no tolerance towards everyone. They got rid of that essentially. Then that's kind of a shame, you know? Because for a minute there, everything was kind of harmonious, especially under Roger's reign, all these different groups. So that's kind of tragic, you know?
And the Greek church had been suppressed, paving the way for the region to be entirely Latinized. Despite this, the legacy of the Franco-Norsemen would endure in the region for centuries after their departure. The realm they founded would persist in one form or another for centuries longer. The direct successors of the Norman Kingdom of Sicily would continue all the way up until 1871, when the entire Italian peninsula was unified into the Kingdom of Italy. Yet even today, the splendor of the churches of Palermo harken back to a time when Latins, Greeks and Arabs lived side by side under Norman rule. Meanwhile, the bones of the fallen, from Naples to Syracuse, remind all of us of a time when the descendants of the Vikings ruled in the heart of the Latin world. We are planning more videos on medieval history, so make sure—
And that's it, huh? Again, the realm of the Normans wasn't that long-lived, but they had quite the cool run. It's a shame it ended. Like, I feel like they didn't last too long in the grand scheme of things, though obviously their legacy lingers, but still, that was a really great series. I really enjoyed learning about them, because the Normans have popped up many times in these past videos we've seen. I never really looked too deep into them, but now I have a more comprehensive view of them, and they were a really cool, interesting group of people. And overall, this was another banger series by Kings and Generals. I enjoyed it very much, guys. And yeah, I don't think I've seen a Kings and Generals series I haven't enjoyed. I love this guy and all his content. So we'll end it here. This was the last Kings and Generals series for this year, so it was a good one to end off on.